Before we start out, I just want to insert this in here. I do want to apologize for the quality of the video. I was planning on doing a whole table sit down and going through all this, but because I'm already late with this and I have to get my WandaVision review up this week, it is going to be a little bit rushed, and I'm really just going to be using stock images and basic things like that. So I hope you all understand. And anyways, enjoy the video.
This is the future of entertainment.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my ranking of every Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Unfortunately, because I'm recording this the week before the finale of WandaVision, I won't be able to include it in this video, but I will say where I put it on the rankings next week during my recap and review of the show. Now, my rankings work very differently, and this goes for all content for movies, shows, and wrestling. I base it on whether the movie is rewatchable to me, so it's definitely more of my ranking rather than what I consider to be a good movie. So without further ado, let's get into it and get started at the bottom of the list. At number 23, at the bottom of the list, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. For me, this movie is not rewatchable at all. Don't get me wrong, it's a very funny movie, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely should. The movie is basically a chase movie, jumping from scene to scene very quickly, but it just doesn't have a very memorable villain or any amazing sequences that come to mind. The only purpose of this movie was to set up the quantum realm for Avengers End Game. Ultimately, to rewatch this movie, it's just really boring and doesn't have any star quality to it. At 22, we have The Incredible Hulk. Yes, I did include it. This movie is very similar to Ant-Man and the Wasp in the sense that it's a chase movie. There's only one sequence in this movie that really saves it from being bottom of the barrel, and that's the ending fight scene with Abomination. Looking back, the fight really is just one of the best in the MCU, and it really does do a good job of monster versus monster movie. Hopefully with the upcoming She-Hulk, many people, including myself, will find a newfound respect for this movie, seeing as Abomination will be returning. Coming in at number 21, we have Thor: The Dark World. You know it was going to be down here somewhere. The movie is very slow and very boring. It was a total letdown after the first Thor movie, which I totally loved, and out of the trilogy, it's definitely the weakest link. The only redeeming qualities of this are the few action-packed fight sequences, but see, some of the dialogue, The main purpose of this film is just to define where the Aether or the Reality Stone is for later down the line during Infinity War. And following that, at number 20, we have Thor. This movie was pretty interesting, but personally, I think the other 20 movies are so much more watchable. The movie has a good rhythm to it, with some good jokes, holding one of my favorites in the MCU, when Thor smashes his glass down and yells for another!
Great, right?
Another!
The scene with the Destroyer, in my opinion, is great, and a good David versus Goliath fight, or I guess in this case it's kind of like Goliath versus Goliath, because I wouldn't really consider Thor a David character. Either way, it's a decent movie, and it's the placement for me. The original Ant-Man takes the number 19 spot. It's a great movie and one of the funniest in the MCU. The show has a really good tempo, but not so entertaining villain. Cross just isn't a good villain, and we never really get his true motives other than just he wants to hurt Hank Pym for not sharing his work with him. I don't know, I just not really doing it for me. That ending battle is one of my least favorites in the series, just in front of Ant-Man and the Wasp. The middle of this film is where the gold really is, though, and how can you not love those Luis sequences? At number 18, we have Iron Man 3. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this movie. I think it's only just above Ant-Man because of the ending battle. I really enjoyed watching all those suits come together to fight side by side, but there are definitely some weak points in this movie. For me, I was more interested in what was happening to everyone besides Tony for the majority of the movie. Harley was just annoying and not very interesting, but really is that final sequence that just saves the whole film. Coming in at number 17, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and we are getting to that part of the list where I'm not going to be so harsh with these movies. This is another great movie, and the colors and aesthetics are really what makes me want to watch it again. Visually, it's such a great movie. The middle and end are my favorite parts of this movie, especially the Rocket and Yondu scenes. Those are some of the best. The final battle is pretty great with one of the saddest deaths in the MCU. Unfortunately, it's a really great movie, but it just doesn't hold up to some of the others. Popping in at number 16, we have Spider-Man Homecoming. I have my fair share of issues with the MCU Spider-Man, but I'll save that for a different video. This movie is really great and super fun to watch. Spider-Man sequences are some of the best, and Ned is probably the most lovable MCU character. Sorry to all you Groot stans. Vulture is a fantastic villain, and the ending battle is so fun to watch. What really stands out about this movie is the contrast of all the characters that just work so well. The first Iron Man movie is inserted at number 15. I like this movie. It's a great way to kick off the MCU, especially if you're watching in release order. The proper way to watch it, the way you should watch it. The whole movie carries fantastic momentum, and Tony Stark as a character is just great. His story really makes you want to keep watching. The final battle with Ironmonger is great, and he uses such key points from throughout the movie to build up tension and tell a fantastic story. After Iron Man, at number 14, we have the first Guardians of the Galaxy. For me, this movie is awesome, and contrary to many others, I love Ronan as a villain. The movie sets up Thanos and the Power Stone so well, and the cast of characters plays off one another fantastically. The movie has two of the most memorable scenes, being the prison break and that opening scene with Star-Lord dancing through the ancient ruins. It really holds a great spot among the rest of the contenders. At number 13, we get Black Panther. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. This movie was praised as possibly the best MCU movie, but personally, I don't agree with that by any stretch. It's a great movie. I love Killmonger as a villain, and Chadwick's performance as T'Challa is amazing. Unfortunately, where the movie falls down the list is a little in the opening sequence and some of the filler in the middle. I think that battle is remembered by most, but as much as I love Andy Serkis's Claw, his scenes really just felt like more of a setup for Killmonger than developing his own character. Number 12 is the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron. I enjoy this movie a lot, and it has some great sequences, introducing us to 3 new Avengers and Ultron's fantastic character. I think it's a great movie. With memorable sequences like that opening scene, the Hulk rampage, and the final Ultron battle, it really is a rewatchable movie. This movie sets up so much for movies later down the line, and Ultron ends up being one of the best villains in the MCU. Number 11 gives us our first Captain America entry in Captain America: The First Avenger. This is one of my favorites, and it's such a well done movie. Steve's journey through World War II is so moving and so tight with the comics. Red Skull still holds up as one of the best villains in the MCU. Cap scenes with Bucky are fantastic, and that final airplane sequence is one of the saddest and most touching. Into our top 10 now, we have Iron Man 2, my favorite out of the Iron Man trilogy, which is quite controversial. Whiplash is one of my favorite villains in the movies, and Justin Hammer really does it for me. I love seeing War Machine fight side by side with Iron Man in that final battle, and as much as it is a little bit of a copy of the first one, I think this movie just does it better. That race car suit-up sequence is probably my favorite Iron Man suit-up in all 23 movies, and it's just a great movie overall. Now at number 9, we have Captain Marvel. I won't lie to you, I do have a bias here, as Captain Marvel is one of my favorite comic book characters of all time. I think the middle of this movie is what takes the cake for me. All the sequences with the Skrulls are fantastic, and I'm a big fan of the back and forth between Talos and Fury. The final battle was a little weak for me, but the very first sequence are the only two downsides for me. Number 8, we have the first Avengers film, a great film that establishes the first ever amazing superhero team-up. Loki is a great villain in this film and really just gives such a good overall vibe. Something about these big team-up films just has such a strong place in my heart that it has the hair on the back of my neck standing up every time I watch them. The final battle is one of the greatest scenes in the MCU, and I love the storytelling here, especially between Tony and Bruce. Number 7 gives us our second Spider-Man film, Far From Home. I love this movie. The visual of Mysterio and his illusions are great, and it's such a great movie to watch. Even with some hilarious sequences, this movie really strikes an emotional tone and gives the feelings. I think Spider-Man really develops as a character, and it introduces a new, braver, and more confident side that will hopefully lead to more in the future. At number 6, we have Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This movie is great in terms of storytelling, one of the best. The scenes are so visually great, and it really is a defining story for Captain America and what's to come. The Winter Soldier himself has such a complex story that really hits the right string. Every time Cap and Bucky fight, it's such a great fight with beautiful choreography. Now in the top 5, at number 5, I place Doctor Strange. The visuals in this movie are stunning, and for as much of it as there is, I think this has some of the best CGI in any of the Marvel movies. Those sequences and the different dimensions and the overall use of magic just looks amazing, and it just really wants to make you keep watching. The final battle, although a little lackluster, which is why it's lower on this list, is still absolutely phenomenal to watch. At number 4, we have Captain America: Civil War. I told you I was a sucker for those team-ups. Another movie that introduces 3 more Avengers. This movie really sets the tone for the beginning of Infinity War. The movie is amazing all the way through. Zemo has such a complex character that I can't wait to see more of, and this movie has some great scenes from that airport battle to the final battle. It's all just so great to watch. At number 3, we have the big one, Avengers Infinity War. This movie is just... Do I really have to say anything? From the opening scene to the final battle, this movie is just fantastic. And there's only one thing that really pulls this movie down a little, and that's the Thor sequences. While he does have a great story, and here those scenes just really slow down the momentum, especially during the final battle when we just all of a sudden cut back to the forge. But other than that, this is a perfect movie. Not just one of the greatest superhero movies of all time, but one of the greatest movies of all time. Number 2 brings us Thor Ragnarok. I could watch this movie hundreds and hundreds of times over. The colors in this movie are just phenomenal, and the alien world we get to see on Sakaar. Personally, my favorite scene is the Hulk versus Thor in the stadium. Other than maybe Karl Urban's performance, there really is no downside to this movie. Hela is an awesome villain, and I hope at some point we get to see Surtur return for a real battle, but this movie just does all of it right. And if you couldn't guess what number 1 is, from the second you clicked on the video, we have Avengers End Game. There's not much to talk about here. I'm just going to list the great sequences in this movie. Tony's return to Earth, Thor chopping off Thanos' head, everyone living in this gray world without half the population, Tony's scenes with his daughter, going back to the first Avengers movie, going back to Guardians of the Galaxy, seeing what it was like for Nebula and Gamora under Thanos' rule, going back to New Jersey and seeing Tony and his dad have a heart-to-heart, the big 3 versus Thanos, Avengers Assemble, the final battle, the final battle, the final battle. I Am Iron Man, Tony's funeral, and of course, seeing Cap get what he always wanted. It is just the most perfect superhero movie of all time. Whether you've seen any of the others or not, you'll certainly enjoy watching this one over and over and over again. That does it for my Marvel Cinematic Universe movies ranked. Let me know what you thought of my list in the comments down below, and feel free to shame me for anything you think should have been different. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more Marvel content, such as my WandaVision recap and review, releasing sometime this week. Other than that, I'll be putting the show into the list somewhere. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one.